This is the Pong Su, a North Korean cargo ship carrying 150 kilograms of heroin worth over 100 million. It's the 15th of April, 2003, and the Pong Su is sailing through the Bass Strait, approaching the coastline of southern Australia. This is the culmination of a long and circuitous naval voyage. The Pong Su left its home harbor of Napo in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on February 25th, carrying 30 crew captained by Song Man's son. The crew is not just made up of sailors, political. Secretary Cho Dong represents the Korean Workers' Party on board the vessel. His job is to prevent defections and enforce allegiance to the North Korean regime. The Pong Su is an unusual vessel, originally manufactured in 1980 by a Japanese firm and designed to carry timber. She is 106 meter long and 4,000 gross tons. The ship had also undergone a series of unusual modifications. Some of her ballast tanks have been converted into extra fuel tanks for increased range, and a false bulkhead has been constructed in the lower accommodation deck. The next day, the Pong Su arrived in Yandai in eastern China, where she loaded 5,000 tons of feldspar and returned back towards Nammo, this time making port at Cheredo, a small island off the North Korean mainland. Here, 2 new crew members boarded the ship, Sar Wong and an unidentified man. Investigators would later allege that these men brought with them 150 kilos of heroin, separated into 1 kilo packages, which were stowed below deck within the Pong Su's false bulkhead. Evidence of North Korean drug smuggling goes back to the 1970s. Early cases were marked by small quantities of drugs trafficked by North Korean diplomatic personnel. By the mid-1990s, the size and frequency of drug seizures began to rise. To facilitate this increase, the DPRK expanded its drug production capabilities with North Korean defectors, alleging that after establishing an experimental farm in Hampyeong province in 1988-89, the regime issued a countrywide public order to develop opium for export, and police officials ordered farmers to switch from growing grain to the more lucrative poppy crop. Over time, these operations expanded to include collective poppy farms in Yona, Musan, and Onong. Later in 2003, an investigation carried out by the U.S. Senate alleged that North Korea produces poppy and manufactures heroin for sale abroad. The proceeds from these sales fund North Korea's large military and nuclear program. With its illicit new cargo on board, the Pong Su began making its way towards Singapore, where the ship loaded fuel before leaving port for Indonesia. At some point on this journey, the Pong Su registered under a flag of convenience, a business practice that enabled ship owners to register a ship in a foreign country. By doing this, the Pong Su removed any obvious reference to its North Korean owners, and instead began flying the flag state of the island republic of Tuvalu. The Pong Su arrived in Jakarta on March 27th and offloaded their cargo at Feldspar. They left on April 1st, declaring their next port as Melbourne, Australia. At the same time as the Pong Su was making its long journey around Southeast Asia, 3 men arrived in Australia from Bangkok: Yao Kim Lam, Kiam Fangan, and Chin Kwong Lee. Investigators would later allege that these men worked for crime syndicates based across Macau, Hong Kong, and Thailand, and were in direct communication with the North Korean smugglers. Unfortunately for the 3 men, their arrival in Australia had not gone unnoticed. Australian federal police had been tipped off via their embassy in Thailand that the group would be entering the country as part of a large drug smuggling operation. With this knowledge, the police set about tracking the 3 men. Their rental car was bugged, and surveillance teams were deployed to follow their movements as they traveled around southern Australia in the jacket. As North Korean trafficking increased in the 1990s, its methods also began to change. Diplomat smugglers began to be phased out. In their place, DPRK trading companies emerged as a focal point for drug trafficking. This allowed the North Korean state to maintain a degree of separation from smuggling activities. The Pong Su was owned by one such group, the Pong Su Trading Company. The DPRK had also started to cooperate with criminal organizations. According to high-profile defector Kim Don-hong, North Korean officials hosted Southeast Asian drug lords in Pyongyang and maintained contact with criminal organizations in Japan, Laos, and Burma. This graph shows drug seizures suspected to be linked to the DPRK compared with those actually trafficked by North Korean officials. As North Korean smugglers began to be phased out, their role was replaced by foreign criminal contacts. The Pong Su shipment was an example of this emerging strategy, with syndicate representatives Lontang and Lee set to receive the shipment of heroin from the Pong Su for distribution inside Australia. To do this, a drop-off point had been agreed between the 2 parties: Bogley Creek, a quiet stretch of beach in southern Australia along Victoria's Great Ocean Road. The Pong Su reached Australian waters on April 7th. It took a wide route around the bottom of Western Australia, avoiding the busier shipping lanes before arriving off the Victoria coast on the morning of April 15th. By the evening, the weather had become stormy, with large waves breaking onto the shoreline. The weather was not the only thing jeopardizing the operation. The Australian Federal Police had followed their targets to the beach and were now observing the exchange from the distance. On board the Pong Su, the heroin was separated into 6 packages, each weighing approximately 25 kilos. The packages were then lowered into a small motorized dinghy along with the 2 crew members who had boarded the Pong Su separately at Chiado, Tara Wong, and an unidentified man. Their task was to carry the cargo to the beach, deliver it to the shore party, and return to the Pong Su, but things would not go to plan. Precisely what occurred on their journey to the beach was later detailed by Australian court documents. The inflatable dinghy suffered problems with its fuel supply and overturned in the surf near Bogley Creek, resulting in the death of 1 man. After landing upon the shore, Tar Wong buried the deceased man. The dinghy was inoperable and he had no means of returning to the ship. 1 package of heroin was lost at sea, but approximately 125 kilograms of heroin were landed on the beach. The botched operation had left 1 crew member dead, another stranded, and 25 kilos of heroin lost to sea. In the ensuing confusion, the shore party were only able to load 2 packages of heroin into their car. The remaining 75 kilos were hidden on the beach to be picked up later. Lam, Tang, and Lee drove back to their accommodation while Tara Wong hid on the beach, contemplating his next move. The Pong Su lingered nervously off the coastline, unsure whether Wong would return. The next morning, Australian police closed the net. Officers arrested Tang and Lee outside their hotel room and lawn, where they discovered 2 packages of heroin that had been left, uncovered in the boot of their car. Lam was arrested separately in a motel closer to Melbourne. Back at Bogley Creek, police made a series of shocking discoveries. The body of the deceased man haphazardly buried on the beach, 3 more packages hidden on a coastal path, and Tar Wong cold, hungry, and stranded. With all members of the shore party apprehended, attention turned to the Pong Su, which had by now left Bogley Creek, heading southwest towards Wye River before turning south into Bass Strait. A chase quickly ensued. A Tasmanian police vessel followed the Pong Su through the Bass Strait shipping lanes, while planes followed the pursuit overhead. The following day, an Australian warship, the HMAS Stuart, was dispatched from Sydney. On Sunday, 20th of April at 5 a.m., the Stuart boarded the Pong Su, arrested her crew, and began towing the vessel back towards Sydney Harbour. The Ponggu incident was finally over, but its legacy can tell us a lot about how North Korean drug smuggling worked. Firstly, the overall structure of the operation was fairly typical of North Korean smuggling, with drugs being transported via a North Korean trading company and handed off to a criminal organization for distribution. This pattern repeats throughout the early 2000s with a series of DPRK-related incidents involving Taiwanese, Japanese, and Chinese criminal organizations. The Ponggu case also raised interesting questions about the level of North Korean state involvement in drug smuggling. Although the shipment likely required some level of state approval, it is not clear to what extent the North Korean government actually orchestrated the entire operation. The rundown condition of the Ponggu, her aging crew, and the malfunctioning dinghy, as well as the small and disorganized shore party, are all indications that the operation lacked sophisticated state backing. This has led some commentators to speculate that North Korean officials might be running drugs because Kim Jong-il has ordered them to do so, or are many of them freelancing to line their own pockets? We can also learn about the provenance of North Korean heroin. The packages seized from the Pong Su bore the logo of the WO Globe brand, typically produced within the so-called Golden Triangle of Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos, pushing U.S. Army analysts in 2005 to conclude that the drugs seized on the Ponggu originated from the Golden Triangle. This suggests North Korea is not only selling drugs, but delivering them from other countries. However, later research conducted by the University of New South Wales found that the chemical profile of the heroin was inconsistent with other WO Globe samples, indicating that the material was more likely to have been produced inside North Korea and simply packaged to look like WO Globe heroin. It would seem then that in the same way that North Korea allegedly counterfeits money, consumer goods, and pharmaceuticals, it is also engaged in counterfeiting branded narcotics. Following its seizure by Australian authorities, the Ponggu was berthed at Sydney Harbour. It would stay there for the next 2 years at a cost of $90,000 per month. Eventually, it was decided that the ship should be scuttled. On the morning of the 23rd of March 2005, the empty Pong Su was towed 80 miles off the Australian coast and bombed by 2 F-111 aircraft. This destruction took on a symbolic quality. It represented the end in a period of widespread North Korean drug smuggling, with some U.S. government officials speculating that high-profile incidents, particularly involving the Ponggu in Australia, have forced the North Koreans to lay low on the drug trade. In the place of drug smuggling, the DPRK has found other, more lucrative means of revenue generation,